They took me in as a foster kid, but only to steal my identity. I was 12 when I finally got adopted. The Hendersons smiled warmly, hugging me tight and promising I'd never have to suffer again. I clung to their words like a lifeline, until I met their real son, Tyler. He was my age, in my grade, even kind of looked like me. But just 2 weeks into my new life, he stormed through the door and punched me straight in the stomach. I hadn't done anything wrong. He'd just gotten a bad grade. I didn't want to be seen as a snitch, so I didn't tell. Instead, I limped and winced around the house, hoping they'd notice. And they did. We were all sitting at the dinner table when my new parents finally said something. "Gerbert, what happened to you?" Before I could even answer, Tyler smirked and jumped in. That was me. Got another crappy math grade. Instead of being horrified, they nodded like they'd expected it. My mom grabbed my hand with a weird softness and said, "Tyler struggles with school. He lashes out when he's stressed. The last kid we fostered couldn't handle it. We had to let him go after Tyler broke his arm." My new dad added, "But you're different. We read your file. You've been through worse. You can take it." I tried to speak up. I don't think I'm okay with being hit. But my dad cut me off, sharp. "You remember where you came from, don't you? Where no one cared when things were stolen from you nightly." My mom gave me that sweet voice threat and added, "We wouldn't want to send you back there." Right then, I got it. I wasn't adopted to be their child. I was brought in to be Tyler's emotional punching bag. They didn't care about me. They just needed someone expendable. The only part of my life where I felt in control was school. I didn't just survive in class, I thrived. My grades were flawless. Teachers adored me. So, to keep my peace, I let my parents believe I was failing. No way was I going to let them ruin the one thing I was good at. But my secret didn't stay hidden. One afternoon, I was quietly doing homework when my mom barged in with a huge grin. "We saw your report card." She kissed my forehead, and I braced for something awful. "You're a genius, sweetheart," she gushed. "Tyler flunked everything. We've got an idea." I tensed. "Do you want me to tutor him?" She shook her head. "No, not exactly. I think you two should just switch places. You take his tests. He takes yours." I wanted to scream absolutely not. But then the memories of the group home hit. Fighting for scraps, being assaulted, crying myself to sleep on a moldy mattress. Being a homework slave was better than that hell. So I forced a smile. "Sure, I'll do it." And just like that, the con was on. Monday morning, I walked into Tyler's math class and wrote his name on the exam. I finished in record time and knew I aced it. Meanwhile, he was drawing crude cartoons on my English test to tank it on purpose. As his grades soared, so did his aggression. He started picking spots on my body that wouldn't bruise visibly. Strategic hitting, he called it. And my reward for giving him a GPA? A bus pass. He got a brand new car. What made it worse were the teachers. One day, after I wrote a flawless essay under his name, Mrs. Garcia stopped him and said, "Tyler, this essay shows so much depth. Ever thought about the school's literary magazine?" He laughed in her face. "Reading is for nerds." She just smiled like he was being shy. By 10th grade, Tyler was milking the fake genius role hard. He bragged at parties. "Yeah, I used to be a dumbass. Then I just focused up. All mindset." That phrase stuck in my head. So, out of pure spite, I gave him a C- on his next test. Just enough to shake his ego. But I paid for that. Report cards came out and at 3 a.m., I was yanked out of bed by my dad. What followed felt like being dragged back into the group home. Only worse. When it was finally over, I was breathless and sore. He patted me on the head like some dog. "Good boy. Now go make Tyler breakfast. He's got a big test." Something in me snapped. The anger didn't matter anymore. These people were monsters. Cold, manipulative criminals who used children as props. And criminals always slip up. I knew I had to be smart. I made breakfast like I always did. Eggs sunny side up, crispy edges, the way Tyler liked. My mind was racing with plans, but my hands moved calmly, buttering toast and placing food carefully. At the table, I felt every second ticking like a time bomb. Mrs. Henderson sat across from me, scrolling on her phone, pretending we were some happy family. She suddenly perked up. "Oh, Gerbert. Almost forgot. Tyler's SAT is next month." She said it like it was nothing. Like I didn't already know I'd be the one taking it. "My friend works at the testing center. She understands Tyler's special needs," Mrs. Henderson said lightly over breakfast. My stomach clenched. Regular school exams were one thing, but the SAT? That was a federal test. Falsifying those meant prison-level consequences. I kept my face still, chewing slowly, pretending nothing was wrong. Tyler reached for the coffee pot and accidentally knocked it toward me. Boiling liquid spilled across my hand. The pain was blinding, but I didn't flinch. I just gritted my teeth and stared at my plate while the skin on my hand screamed. Tyler squinted at me, clearly noticing the change. Something in me had shifted after that 3 a.m. beating, and now he could sense it. At school, I moved like a shadow. I kept my head down and avoided attention. The burn on my hand throbbed with every movement, but I couldn't risk the nurse asking questions. Just before English class, I slipped in and tried to disappear into my seat when Miss Garcia stopped me. "Gerbert, a word." My chest tightened as I approached her desk. She waited until the class had quieted before she spoke in a soft voice. "I've noticed bruises. And you've been walking stiffly. Is everything okay at home?" Her eyes were full of real concern. I wanted to say yes, to tell her everything. But I thought about how loved the Hendersons were. Big donors, involved parents, the kind that schools protected. No one would believe me. "I've been playing a lot of basketball. Got roughed up a bit," I said smoothly. She clearly didn't buy it, but nodded anyway. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Lunch was the same as always. Me at the far table alone. Tyler soaking up attention like a celebrity. "Yeah, my grandparents set up a trust fund," he was saying. "But I only get it if I get into a top college. Thank God I turned things around." He was already lying about his fake success. One of his buddies asked how he did it. "Just stopped being lazy. I'm actually a genius if I try." I could barely swallow my sandwich. They weren't just using me for now. They were planning years ahead. College, scholarships, trust funds. How long did they plan to keep me trapped? I climbed the stairs to my room after school, barely dragging my feet, worn down from the constant pretending. But the second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. My drawers were open. My papers had been moved. The faint scent of Mrs. Henderson's perfume hung in the air. My heart leapt. My journal. I dropped my backpack and lunged toward my hiding place under the mattress. It was gone. Panic roared through me. That notebook had every detail, every bruise, every date, every test I took for Tyler. I tore through my room in desperation, checking every spot. Nothing. I didn't think. I just stormed down to the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson was slicing vegetables at the counter, her movements calm and measured. "Where is it?" I said, my voice shaking. "Where is what, sweetie?" she asked without looking up. "You know what? My journal. You took it." She finally turned to face me, the knife still in her hand, glinting in the light. "Privacy is something that's earned, Gerbert," she said in that fake warm tone. She brought the knife down hard on a carrot. "We're a family. Families don't hide things." The message was clear. I went back upstairs, trying to breathe. Later, I found the journal on my bed, looking innocent, until I flipped through it. Several pages were torn out. Not just missing, ripped. And Tyler's grimy fingerprints were smeared across the remains like a signature. Every record of abuse, every note about the Hendersons, gone. At dinner, Mr. Henderson made an announcement like it was just another Tuesday. "We're upgrading our home security. Cameras in the halls, living room, entrances. We'll be monitoring from our bedroom, just to keep everyone safe." I could barely keep my fork steady. What about the bedrooms? I asked as evenly as possible. Oh, just common areas, he said with a smile. But the message was clear. Every step I took would be watched. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, my only real friend left. Haven't seen you in forever. Want to hang this weekend? I stared at it, my chest aching. I hadn't even realized how much distance the Hendersons had forced between me and everyone who cared. They'd isolated me. Tyler's controlled violence, the endless fake homework, now cameras watching me all the time. Every inch of my life was theirs. When the house fell silent, I crept into the bathroom. I locked the door, turned on the sink, and flipped on the phone's timer camera. I carefully snapped photos in the mirror. My burned hand, the bruises on my arms, the red stripes on my ribs. I saved them to a hidden folder I labeled Tyler's Awards. If anyone found it, they'd think it was school stuff. The irony made me sick. The doorknob jiggled. I hurried to shut everything off, flushed the toilet, and opened the door. Tyler stood there like a statue. "What were you doing in there so long?" he asked. "Just the bathroom," I replied, trying to squeeze past. He slammed me into the wall with his arm across my throat. "I know you're scheming. I can feel it," he hissed. I stared him down, refusing to show fear. "I'm not doing anything." He held my gaze a moment longer before backing off. "Good. Because if you ever try anything, you'll beg to be back in that group home, getting passed around." The next morning, Mrs. Henderson had another cheerful surprise. Guess what? I volunteered to be the school's new parent liaison. I'll be helping out every day, offices, classes, whatever they need. Isn't that exciting? My stomach dropped. School had been my only safe place. Now she was invading that too. Later, during study hall, I took a risk. I grabbed the family iPad while she was distracted talking to another volunteer. I opened the Messages app and scrolled through old chats. That's when I found them. Texts from someone named James. Dated months ago. "Please help me. Tyler broke my ribs this time. I'm scared. Don't let them hurt me anymore." Then nothing. James, the last foster kid. The one they said couldn't handle it. His silence told me all I needed to know. In chemistry, Tyler passed me a slip of paper, his test answers. Every one was wrong. I had to correct them while making it look like I was just helping him study. The teacher's eyes bored into me as I changed each one. In the library, where I used to be free, I now had to sit through a parent-teacher meeting with Mrs. Henderson, listening to praise about Tyler's transformation. As a last hope, I tried the school counselor again. "I have a friend," I said carefully, "whose family makes them do things. Stuff they're uncomfortable with." Mrs. Patterson narrowed her eyes. "Are you talking about the Hendersons?" I hesitated. "They've done so much for our students. Generous people. A true blessing to this school." And just like that, the door slammed shut again. "Whatever you think is going on, you're probably just confused," the school counselor said gently. Another wall slammed shut. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The next time I swapped tests for Tyler, I snapped pictures of his real work first. Line after line of mistakes. F after F. All cold, hard proof. Then, while doing one of my assigned chores, reorganizing Mrs. Henderson's home office, I stumbled upon a folder labeled foster care. Inside were documents showing they were paid $800 a month for me. But it went further. There were notes about potential foster placements. Comments in the margins like, "Straight A student, good standardized scores, similar look to Tyler." It wasn't an accident. They were selecting kids with academic potential who resembled their son. I wasn't the first. And they weren't planning for me to be the last. That Sunday at dinner with Tyler's grandparents, I sat silently as they praised his amazing transformation. "We always knew he had it in him," his grandmother beamed, patting his hand. "Such a bright boy." As she passed behind me, she slipped a $20 bill into my palm. "For all your hard work," she whispered. That's when I realized, she knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to understand I wasn't just a regular house guest. The truth was clear now. The Hendersons deliberately took in kids like me, bright, vulnerable, with nowhere else to go, and used us to lift Tyler up. Not long after, Sarah, Tyler's ex, pulled me aside after school. "Isn't it weird?" she said, arms crossed. Tyler used to spell definitely like definitely. Couldn't write a sentence. Now he's dropping words like ubiquitous in essays. I answered carefully. "People grow. Sometimes fast." "Not that fast," she shot back. "I still have his old texts." He couldn't write a coherent sentence. Now suddenly he's a literary genius. That sparked something. I asked if he could even explain his essays. "He can't," she said. I asked about the symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird. He just stared at me. Tyler must have seen us talking. Later in the locker room, he cornered me. His punches were as precise as ever, calculated to avoid visible bruises. Each hit stole my breath. "Stay away from Sarah," he growled. "Next time, I won't be so careful." That night at dinner, Mr. Henderson casually mentioned that Sarah's dad had just lost a big deal with his company. "Unfortunate," he said, slicing into his steak. "These things happen." It wasn't just a comment. It was a warning. Defy them, and your loved ones pay too. From then on, Mrs. Henderson insisted I attend Tyler's parties, as his tutor. The first was at a fancy pool party. I sat on the patio with a stack of textbooks while Tyler soaked in praise, laughing in the pool. Mrs. Henderson introduced me to the other parents as their charity project. "Such a sweet boy," she'd say. "We're just doing our part." It burned worse than a bruise. I saw it for what it was, humiliation as control. They wanted me to feel small, dependent, and thankful. That night, I started a fresh journal. I hid it in the lining of an old jacket in my closet, documenting everything. Forced tutoring, public shaming, the lies, the fear. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at our door. I was sitting on the couch, buried in Tyler's homework, when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Henderson answered, her expression faltering as she saw Marcus. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked in, spotted me surrounded by books, noticed the security cameras in every corner. His eyes widened. He looked at me. I saw the word form on his lips. Fuck. Even without sound, it was clear. He'd seen it. The fear I couldn't hide. Mrs. Henderson bounced back quickly, her charm switching on like a light. She offered Marcus cookies, asked polite questions, complimented his clothes. As she lured him into the kitchen, I slipped a folded piece of paper into his pocket. Just 4 words, "Help me. Please." He took it smoothly, never breaking stride. He stayed 15 minutes, pretending everything was fine. As he left, he gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. He'd understood. The next day at school, I created a hidden email account on a library computer. The Hendersons monitored my usual ones, but they wouldn't find this. I began uploading evidence, photos, journal entries, dates. That afternoon, I found an old payphone near the gym and used it to call child services. I waited on hold for 30 agonizing minutes, staring over my shoulder, terrified they'd catch me. Finally, I gave up. The system wasn't going to save me. Not in time. Marcus started texting me, coded messages disguised as gaming talk. Need help with this boss level meant he was checking in. Found a cheat code meant he had something important. Boss fight tonight was a warning. One day behind school, I found a pile of Tyler's college application drafts in the trash. I recognized my handwriting on every one. My words. My essays. Harvard. Yale. Princeton. He was aiming for the Ivy League with my brain. I photographed them all just before Tyler arrived, watching me burn the pages with a smug smile. He wanted to make sure I didn't keep copies. Later, Sarah approached me again, this time with her older sister, Catherine. She looked about 20, with tired eyes and a wary gaze. Catherine had gone to school with James, the last kid the Hendersons fostered. They said he was violent, she told me. Uncontrollable. But James wasn't like that. He was terrified. He ran away. She'd tracked him down. He was in a shelter, 2 towns away, still living in fear. I mentioned James at dinner, watching closely. Mr. Henderson's expression tightened, fork freezing mid-air. Mrs. Henderson's smile looked more like a grimace. Tyler's eyes glinted with satisfaction. Mr. Henderson finally said, "Some children can't be saved." James was unstable. Dangerous. It was rehearsed, seamless. Mrs. Henderson nodded in agreement, still smiling that tight, plastic smile. The lies were second nature. The SAT was 2 weeks away. The fraud was real, and the consequences terrifying. I could barely hold my hand steady while clearing the dishes. Mrs. Henderson noticed and touched my shoulder gently, the way someone might pet a dog. My skin crawled. With help from Catherine, I finally met James. We arranged to meet at a McDonald's halfway between towns. He looked smaller than I expected, nervous, like he hadn't slept in days. He jumped every time the door opened. Over a cold coffee, he told me everything. The test switching, the threats, the manipulation. When I refused to take Tyler's SAT, he said, "They said they'd ruin my file, mark me as violent. No one adopts violent kids." He ran. Left it all behind. Tyler had broken his arm with a baseball bat. James still had the x-rays. It had taken months to heal. Back at school, Tyler started slipping. Teachers began noticing that he couldn't discuss the papers he supposedly wrote. Miss Garcia asked him about a symbol in a story. He froze. Mumbled something about needing to reread it. Math class revealed he couldn't solve simple problems. The history teacher called him out when he couldn't recall a major theme from his own essay. Doubt was spreading. That week, the Hendersons called a family meeting. Their next move wasn't subtle. They had an offer for me. They laid it out clearly. If I helped Tyler through college, handled his coursework, wrote his essays, took his exams, they'd pay for my own education. Any college I wanted. Full tuition. All expenses. A dream, on paper. But I saw through the offer immediately. It wasn't a gift, it was a sentence. For more years of being someone else's ghost. For more years of bruises, silence, and stolen credit. I'd keep being the brain while Tyler played the genius. Nothing would change. But outside their house of cards, cracks had started forming. Teachers were beginning to connect dots. Miss Garcia remembered a writing style she'd seen in essays from a previous student, one who disappeared suddenly. The math teacher recalled a top student who'd mysteriously stopped showing up. Familiar patterns emerged. And Mrs. Henderson's image, once untouchable, began to fray. When the faculty raised concerns during a meeting, she cornered me in the parking lot and hissed threats before fixing her face into her usual smile. For the first time, someone else had seen that slip in her mask. Digging deeper into Mr. Henderson's home office, I found more than just paperwork. I found damning proof. Tax forms showed I'd been listed as a dependent, while they also collected foster care funds. Receipts for educational costs, never spent on me, were filed for reimbursement. A trail of lies and fraud in their own handwriting. Miss Garcia took a bold step. She called me in quietly after class and admitted she'd been tracking similarities in Tyler's essays, comparing them with work from past students. She didn't have enough to accuse him outright, but she was compiling a record. Meanwhile, Marcus set up a shared cloud drive using a game chat platform the Hendersons didn't watch. When I accessed it, I froze. Everything I'd passed him, photos, scanned documents, notes, was backed up and organized. The evidence we needed was there. Sarah, defying her dad's warnings, joined our efforts. She'd looked into the business deal her father lost and confirmed the truth. The Hendersons had nothing to do with it. Their threats were hollow. They just used coincidence as leverage. Their grip wasn't as iron-tight as they made everyone think. The team grew. Marcus, Sarah, Catherine, and I started meeting at Marcus's house. We coordinated carefully, step by step. There was no room for error. Though Sarah wanted to fabricate some additional proof, I refused. We had all we needed. The truth was enough. We just had to present it correctly. Tyler himself helped our case without knowing. During a tense argument about his college plans, he let something slip, complaining about not understanding the essay he'd written. He realized the mistake too late. His parents' faces turned to panic. I recorded it from my lap, my phone hidden under the table. One more nail in their coffin. James, terrified but determined, agreed to give a signed statement. His hand trembled as he wrote out everything. The beatings, the coercion, the fraudulent testing. Everything the Hendersons had done. It wasn't a one-time scheme, it was a blueprint, a system they'd refined over years. Even Tyler's girlfriend turned on him, breaking up with him loudly in the school cafeteria. She called out his fake intelligence for everyone to hear. The humiliation was instant. Rumors caught fire. Students began sharing posts, asking questions. A hashtag started trending. Tyler's carefully built reputation began collapsing. Marcus's brother, a law student, reviewed all our material. His verdict: this was more than just abuse, it was criminal. Educational fraud, tax fraud, identity theft, financial deception. The documents we had were damning. Mrs. Henderson was losing control. After another round of suspicion at school, she cracked completely. This time in the kitchen, snarling and barking threats at me before reapplying her mask of calm. But I'd already seen who she really was. And so had others. Miss Garcia came forward to apologize. She admitted she'd had doubts about James but lacked proof. Now she had it, and she was no longer alone. Other teachers joined her. Quietly, they kept an eye on me, made sure I was never left vulnerable. They started collecting their own records. Mrs. Henderson tried to smooth things over by cozying up to Marcus's parents, showing up with baked goods and sweet words. But Marcus had warned them. They listened politely, but their guard was up. She couldn't fool everyone anymore. Then, one afternoon, Tyler's grandparents came by unannounced. Tyler was stuck on some basic math homework, and instinctively, I explained it. His grandmother watched the entire interaction. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I saw something click in her expression: recognition. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. Word trickled out through the school's parent community. Questions started flowing. Why did Tyler never join study groups? Why did he avoid collaborative assignments? Why didn't his spoken responses match the eloquence of his written essays? In the computer lab, using Marcus's login, I finalized our evidence package. Everything was sorted, time-stamped, cross-referenced, ready to be handed over to whoever needed it. The SAT was 2 days away. My moment of choice had arrived. Either I followed orders, walked into the test center pretending to be Tyler, committed a serious federal crime, or I risked losing everything: college, safety, housing. I would likely age out of the system alone. But taking the test would mean selling my soul. At a school assembly about academic ethics, during the Q&A session, I stood up. My voice didn't shake. What happens, I asked, if someone takes a standardized test for another student? What are the consequences? The auditorium went still. Tyler looked like he was about to throw up. The principal's stare bounced between us, understanding slowly forming. Outside of school, parents began whispering. Why didn't Tyler study with anyone? Why couldn't he discuss the books his essays were about? Why was his verbal performance always lackluster compared to his test results? The mountain of truth had grown too large to ignore. Despite their donations, their charm, their polished family image, the Hendersons were being exposed. They had built their empire on stolen minds and broken kids. And now, it was all unraveling. Truth, after all, doesn't stay buried forever. Mrs. Henderson made one last desperate move to erase all the evidence, but she hadn't realized I had planned for this moment. I had planted copies in places she never thought to check. A flash drive hidden inside her own jewelry box, files saved to school desktop computers, and photos uploaded to multiple cloud accounts under unrelated names. Everything she taught me about being meticulous, I had used against her. She thought she could wipe it clean, but the proof had already spread far beyond her reach. They reacted with panic. The Hendersons demanded I be removed from the home immediately. They labeled me unstable, aggressive, a threat to their safety. But I had taken steps in advance. Marcus' parents had submitted emergency placement forms, and everything had gone through. Their last-second attempt to control the narrative collapsed. When Mr. Henderson tried to grab my arm to keep me from leaving, Marcus' father stepped between us without saying a word. His quiet authority stopped everything. Other parents, who had come to pick up their kids from nearby, began to gather, witnessing the confrontation firsthand. Their once flawless image was crumbling rapidly, every truth rising from the wreckage of their lies. The breaking point came when Tyler's grandparents showed up unexpectedly. They had more questions this time, specifically about his college essays. They handed him a printed copy and asked him to explain the themes. Tyler froze. He couldn't offer a single coherent response. His grandmother pointed to several lines, pressing him gently. Still nothing. His grandfather watched silently, frowning, his expression tightening by the second. Then the realization hit. Her gaze shifted from Tyler to me, her lips tightening. She understood. That night, Tyler barged into my room, but the usual arrogance had vanished. Desperation had taken over. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me as he begged me to fix everything. The bruises on my arms bloomed fresh under his grip, but his panic gave me something more powerful than fear, confirmation. The cracks in their foundation had split wide open. Mrs. Henderson appeared moments later, pulling Tyler back with a chilling smile fixed on her face, maintaining appearances for the guests downstairs. The illusion was still important to her, even as it unraveled. The following morning, everyone gathered for what was labeled a family discussion. But it was far from routine. Tyler's grandparents sat on one side of the dining table. The Hendersons sat across, tense. I poured coffee quietly, keeping my head down. Tyler's grandfather laid a folder on the table. Inside were copies of Tyler's actual work from elementary school. Assignments his teachers had given them during parent visits. The difference between those and his recent accomplishments was glaring. The handwriting, the vocabulary, the depth, it all screamed inconsistency. Mrs. Henderson tried to explain it away. She spoke of tutoring, sudden growth, and late blooming. But the facade shattered when her father-in-law slid over a simple algebra problem and asked Tyler to solve it. Tyler snapped. He threw his pencil down and shouted that he hadn't written a word, hadn't taken any tests. His outburst spiraled into a confession, full of blame and rage. He revealed everything, the manipulation, the deception, the way they used abuse to force obedience. He even talked about James, referencing the baseball bat incident with a strange, unsettling pride. The room went silent. His grandmother covered her mouth as she began to realize the full scope of what had been happening for years. The grandfather pulled out financial statements, bank transfers meant for Tyler's tutoring. They had been unknowingly funding the abuse. He stood slowly, shaking, laying the papers out on the table like evidence in a courtroom. The numbers were damning. Mrs. Henderson lost control. She screamed at Tyler for ruining their operation, for being too foolish to keep the act going. Mr. Henderson tried to calm her, but she pushed him away violently. Their carefully polished image crumbled to dust in minutes. The grandmother rose, her voice steady as she said they would no longer support Tyler financially. She ripped up the trust fund papers and let the pieces fall like broken promises onto the table. The grandfather added that they would speak to their lawyer about reclaiming all the funds they had unknowingly funneled into this scheme. Within hours, Child Protective Services arrived, notified by the grandparents themselves. I was interviewed separately, my injuries documented and photographed. Marcus' family had finalized the necessary paperwork, and I was placed with them immediately. The Hendersons couldn't stop it, not with the grandparents now on my side. An official investigation was launched by the school board. Parents had flooded them with concerns. Teachers came forward with what they'd been collecting. Miss Garcia submitted her own records, suspicions spanning years and implicating not just Tyler but the Hendersons' long history with other foster kids. The response from the community was fast and brutal. Students were pulled from the Henderson home's study groups. Neighbors who once idolized them now whispered with suspicion at the local stores. Their church quietly asked them to worship elsewhere. Mr. Henderson tried one last move. He took to social media, painting me as the manipulator, the troubled foster kid who had led their innocent son astray. He uploaded edited video clips, deliberately framed to make me seem volatile. One showed me standing at the breakfast table, raising my voice. Another cut off just before Tyler shoved me, making my reaction look aggressive. But Marcus was ready. He uploaded full versions of those same clips. The Hendersons' own security footage, unedited, revealed the truth. They showed Tyler lunging at me first. They captured the bruises forming in real time. They erased every lie Mr. Henderson tried to spin. The backlash was swift. Other foster kids who had once lived under the Hendersons' roof came forward. Their stories were all too familiar. They talked about the same tactics, the same punishments, the same threats. Local Facebook groups for parents lit up. Screenshots from Tyler's old posts, full of spelling errors, awkward grammar, and shallow thoughts, were compared with the refined, elegant essays he'd recently submitted. The contrast was too stark, too suspicious. The illusion shattered completely. Parents began to talk about how Tyler couldn't help their kids with simple assignments, despite his supposed academic brilliance. At the next school board meeting, the auditorium overflowed. Angry families demanded to know how such a massive deception had gone unnoticed for so long. Teachers came forward, voicing the doubts they'd buried and the pressure they'd felt to stay silent. The Hendersons sat in the back, the power they once wielded slipping away with every testimony spoken aloud. Some in the community tried to defend them at first, pointing to their history of volunteer work and church leadership. But as more facts surfaced, even their strongest allies fell silent and drifted away. The family that had once run every school fundraiser and dominated local events became pariahs. James spoke to child welfare investigators over video call. His statement, along with his medical records and my detailed notes, painted a consistent picture of long-term abuse and manipulation. More former foster kids stepped forward with eerily similar accounts. That same week, the state revoked the Hendersons' license to foster. Tyler's grandparents took further action. They hired forensic accountants to comb through the family's finances. Years of tax filings exposed a mountain of fraud. The Hendersons had claimed educational expenses they never paid for and cashed in on state aid meant for our care. The IRS soon issued a notice. An audit was on the horizon that would peel back every financial lie. Then came the rejections. One by one, colleges pulled back their offers. First Harvard, then Yale, then Princeton. Each letter was like a weight dropped on Tyler's chest. His fantasy of elite success collapsed in silence. The truth had reached admissions offices, and there was no salvaging the situation. With everything closing in, the Hendersons made a choice. Rather than face a public legal battle, they agreed to transfer guardianship to Marcus' family. The alternative was a formal hearing that would reveal every detail and become part of public record. I packed what little I owned. No one in the house looked me in the eye. Tyler tried one last intimidation tactic, stepping toward me with clenched fists, but his grandfather intervened, placing himself between us like a protective barrier. Marcus' parents welcomed me not as a charity case, but as someone who belonged. They had prepared a real bedroom, not a storage space. That first night, I slept through until morning without fear. No cameras monitoring me, no creaking footsteps outside the door, no dread hanging over breakfast. The Hendersons put their home on the market a few weeks later. They could no longer show their faces around town. Their former friends avoided them on the street. They had to give up their teaching jobs. Parents refused to let their children stay in classes taught by abusers. In a last gasp of manipulation, Mrs. Henderson filed a claim accusing me of theft. But the truth was undeniable. Bank statements proved they had been stealing from me all along, hoarding the money meant for my care. The claim was dropped without hesitation. They left quietly, under cover of darkness, relocating hundreds of miles away. Their new address led to a cramped apartment, so far from the life they'd built on lies. Tyler's car was sold just to fund the move. Their obsession with appearances left them nothing once the facade was gone. Back at school, policy changes began. Oversight for grading and academic records improved. Teachers underwent training to better recognize when foster children were being exploited. My story became part of the training materials, not for sympathy, but to raise awareness. Then, the unexpected happened. Scholarship offers started rolling in from colleges who had heard the story. They saw me not as a victim, but as someone who had fought back with strength and integrity. Ms. Garcia wrote me recommendations that told the truth, not Tyler's fantasy, but the real story of everything I'd endured and overcome. James and I stayed connected, bonded by shared pain and mutual support. He had found shelter and was working on his GED, determined to move forward. Together, we began reaching out to others, helping new foster kids recognize danger signs before it was too late. Marcus' family gave me a foundation I'd never known. Meals were filled with laughter, not fear. My schoolwork was mine to complete, my goals mine to chase. When I got my college acceptance letters, they celebrated with tears and hugs that were real. Half a year later, I stood on a stage wearing a cap and gown. My valedictorian speech was about more than just grades. I spoke of surviving a broken system, of finding value in yourself even when others try to steal it, of how silence enables cruelty, and how speaking up, even when it's terrifying, can save lives. In the crowd sat my new family, Marcus and his parents, Sarah and Catherine, Ms. Garcia, and the teachers who'd finally listened. Even Tyler's grandparents were there. Their presence was a quiet gesture of remorse, a recognition that they had been blind for too long. Meanwhile, in their new city, the Hendersons struggled. Without their carefully constructed image, they were just ordinary people. No prestige, no followers, no safety net. Tyler worked a low-paying job, clinging to bitterness. His dream of coasting through life on someone else's brilliance had died with every college rejection. All the shortcuts they took left them with nothing real to hold on to. My intelligence, the same one they exploited, had become my freedom. Not a tool for their benefit anymore, but a bridge to a future I built myself. With full scholarships and research opportunities, I pursued a life of my own choosing. The foster system, though still imperfect, began adapting. Caseworkers were trained to look for the signs that had once been ignored in my case. My experience became a warning and a guide for how to protect others like me. Tyler's grandparents funded a scholarship program in the aftermath, dedicated to helping foster youth attend college. Their guilt had transformed into action. They asked me to help select the recipients, and I made sure the money went to kids who earned their place through hard work, not manipulation. Though I moved far away for college, I carried the lessons of that chapter with me. Trust took time, but Marcus' family showed me what that looked like. Therapy helped untangle the deeper wounds, the kind that don't show on the surface. My story circulated quietly within social work circles, not as gossip, but as a blueprint. Training sessions referenced it. Foster children were taught how to keep records, how to build networks of trust, how to escape when no one seems to be listening. Tyler reached out once. A bitter, rambling message blaming me for everything he'd lost. I didn't answer. The fact he still couldn't own his mistakes told me all I needed to know. He had been raised to believe he deserved greatness without effort. Now, he had to live with what he'd become. I graduated with honors. My diploma had my name on it, earned through my own words, my own sweat, my own strength. And when I walked across that stage, I carried the weight of the past, but only so far as it pushed me toward the future.